Alrighty, good morning or good afternoon or whenever you're catching this first podcast episode. Not even sure when I've posted it yet. I have no idea when I'm going to post it, but hopefully it catches you at a good time. Alright, so today we're going to talk about what is conjugate. This is a question I get all the time, something largely misunderstood. So I think it is important that this is where we're going to start. So I was reading Super Training the other day, so I like to go through there. It's not a book that I like to read and sit down and put hours into it. But it's a book that I go back, I highlight things, go through it. I look back at things, I reread things. That's just kind of how I like to read books. Same with some of my other strength conditioning books. I just like going through them and looking back on things. And I usually catch something I didn't catch before. But it's not something that I'm sitting down and leisurely reading. But I was reading Super Training and I came across this quote. And I think this is kind of where we need to start if we're going to talk about the topic of what is conjugate. Okay. So the conjugate sequence system involves successfully introducing into the program separate, specific means, each of which has stronger training effects, as well as coupling them sequentially to create a favorable condition. Okay, so I think the first part of that we have to understand is that we are using multiple methods at one time. Okay, that is what ultimately makes something conjugate, is if you are using the three methods of maximal muscular tension. Okay, so when we're talking about the three methods of maximal muscular tension, we're talking about max effort, we're talking about dynamic effort, we're talking about repetition effort. Okay, so these three things have to be present in a training system in order to be considered conjugate. Okay, so these things are going to have to be concurrently within a system. You're going to probably be using these things weekly. In my case, daily, which eventually we'll talk about how I set up my conjugate program. But ultimately, this is what makes something conjugate. Okay, it's just the use of multiple methods, okay, inside of a program. Okay, and so these methods are going to help you achieve maximal muscular tension. So in the max effort method, we are talking about straining against heavy resistance. Okay, we're talking about the slowest, most potent stimulus you can get, which would look something like some sort of 1 rep max. Okay, dynamic effort, this is going to be accelerating sub-maximal weights at maximal voluntary velocity. Okay, so dynamic effort can fall under a variety of speeds. So it can fall at 0.6, 0.8, 1 meters per second, can go well over 1 meters per second, especially when we're talking about weighted jumps. Okay, weighted jumps are going to touch well over 1 meters per second into the 2s and 3 meter per seconds. Okay, if you're talking about like weighted sprints or some sort of resistance running like a sled push, okay, you're going to reach, again, over 7 meters per second, potentially up to 9 meters per second, depending how fast you are. Okay, so this is essentially where the speeds are going to start to vary. Okay, max effort is going to be the slowest thing we do. Dynamic effort is going to be the fastest thing we do regarding resistance. And the repetition effort method, the third method to achieve maximal muscular tension, is going to be to take an exercise, take some sort of task to muscular failure, okay, or extremely close, okay. So these are going to be the three ways that we are going to create maximal muscular tension, okay. And within a conjugate system, you're going to sequence these, you're going to rotate these, and you're going to attack with these three methods to create a more superior, explosive, stronger athlete, okay. And so this is where conjugate starts to become a very potent system, because we're not just using one method, we are using multiple methods in a sequence. Okay, this is the second part of the system that I want to talk about, is sequencing. Okay, if you are a conjugate system, you should be sequencing methods, you should be sequencing exercise, you should be sequencing adaptations. Okay, these stimuluses that you are sequencing, this is going to create those favorable conditions. Okay, so it's not enough to just throw things at the wall and hope they stick. You have to strategically sequence things, which is, again, this is why things like the max effort rotations are so important. So if you look at things like from Westside, they have specific rotations that they use to break records. Okay, rotations are extremely important. When you look at a brief maximal tension system like myself, the exercise rotations might be one of the most important things regarding the system. So this is something that we will talk about, again, going further, but keep in mind you need these 3 methods of maximal muscular tension. You also need to sequence. Okay, the sequences need to be within the system. Okay, so what types of things would you need to sequence, and how would you sequence? How would you make something conjugate? Okay, again, the way I like to view conjugate is essentially a rotation of speeds with a variety of means. Okay, and so what that means is that you're going to use multiple different speeds with these 3 methods of maximal muscular tension. Okay, you're going to get these 3 maximal muscular tension methods, and you're going to be getting 3 speeds that are going to be, and going to be more than 3 speeds, but you're going to get 3 kind of speed sections that are going to be carried out with a variety of means. They're all going to be inherently creating different adaptations. Okay, so the next thing that we probably should talk about regarding what is a conjugate system, and perhaps maybe what is not a conjugate system. Okay, we talked about using maybe a variety of means. Okay, in order to train with these 3 methods of tension, you're going to need a variety of means. Okay, you're not going to be able to use the same exercises, the same tension types, the same speeds. Things like that are going to have to change. Those are going to be those variables that you play around with. Those are going to be the ways that you sequence a program. Okay, so what conjugate is not? Conjugate is not bands or chains. Okay, it's not specialty bars. Okay, it's not powerlifting. It's not multiply. Okay, that is not what conjugate is. Conjugate is a system of athletic performance. Okay, it is a system that is predicated on developing multiple different special strengths. Okay, so not only just maximal strength, but speed strength and strength speed and max velocity and power. And we have a variety of abilities that we need to develop, along with things like aerobic fitness. Okay, we need to have GPP within our training. We need to have muscle mass. So a conjugate program is inherently concurrent. Okay, which means that you're going to train multiple abilities. Okay, so if one thing that I've seen a lot is what is the difference between a conjugate and a concurrent program? Well, conjugate is concurrent. Okay, simple as that. Conjugate is concurrent because a conjugate system is using a variety of methods that are inherently creating a variety of adaptations. Okay, so these are a few things that you should keep in mind when it comes to conjugate. If something is using those 3 methods of maximal muscular tension, you are using a conjugate system. Okay, systems that would be considered conjugate. Okay, so when we look at the world of programming, there's a ton of different things out there. Okay, some of the most popular ones, West Side Barbell. Okay, that is a conjugate system. That's probably the one that everybody associates with conjugate. Again, West Side is not the only conjugate system out there. We have systems like 531. 531 is a conjugate system. Okay, the tier system, that is a conjugate system. Things like West Side for Skinny Bastards is a conjugate system. So each of these things are conjugate systems. Okay, and so all that means is they're carrying out those variety of speeds. Okay, and so that's essentially all conjugate is. Conjugate is not, again, it's been kind of misconstrued that it is some sort of multiply powerlifting system. It's a system used for, used in, with drugs, anabolic steroids, and things like that. Okay, it has been largely misrepresented all over the internet. Okay, conjugate at its core is just training a variety of speeds training a rotation of speeds with a variety of means. Okay, so when you're thinking about whether your system is conjugate, if you are training athletes, you are probably conjugate, I hope. If you're just training one specific speed, if you're just using a specific type of mean, you're not rotating things, you're not sequencing things, then I would imagine that your training is probably not very good. You essentially have to go conjugate. Okay, you have to go conjugate. There's no other way around it. If you are looking at developing the greatest, most explosive athlete, whether it is a powerlifter, it is a football player, a basketball player, anything like that, you have to go conjugate eventually. Okay, and so this is something that people maybe want to deny, that they're not using a conjugate system. Everything is conjugate at some point. Everything becomes conjugate. You have to go conjugate. There's no other way around it. And so this kind of leads me into, again, common misconceptions when it comes to conjugate. Okay, there's a lot of common misconceptions when it comes to conjugate about who it's effective for. Again, I've heard it's not effective for young athletes. I've heard it's not effective for older athletes. I've heard it's not effective for powerlifters. I've heard it's not effective for just, any age of athlete. Okay. Conjugate is not a program. It is a system of training. It's a philosophy. It's a way of life. It's a way that you look at what is happening in the physical world. Okay. So conjugate is not as simple as giving somebody a 5x5 and calling it good. Right? Conjugate's not as simple as giving somebody, 3 sets of 5 and then, 3 sets of 3 and then the 5-3-1. Like, it's not as simple as that. Okay? Those are parts of a conjugate system. Those are just little parts. Okay? A conjugate system is going to involve looking at each athlete and developing specific speeds and abilities they need. Okay? This is what makes conjugate hard. This is why conjugate is a smart man's training program. You cannot have afford to not be reading the books. You can't afford to not have context. It takes years to perfect. And there's really no perfection when it comes to the system because there's always something that needs to get fixed. But this is where conjugate offers you flexibilities because you have everything available, right? So if I have a athlete that is super, super weak, right? I have access to multiple methods, right? I got the max effort method, I got the brief maximal tension method. Those would be my preferred methods. Say I have an athlete that is extremely strong, but again, cannot use the greatest extent of their force in a rapid manner. I have dynamic effort, right? Say I have an athlete that is severely underweight or is constantly getting hurt. Say I have someone that has a hamstring problem, okay? Repetition effort would be great for that because you're just going to develop soft tissue. Okay, so those would be methods that you would kind of plug and play regarding different weaknesses. But if you're in a system like a 5x5 system, you have nothing to do. You're giving people 5x5s, right? What if that person needs or responds better to a different rep range? Say they need a different sequence of training, right? Say they need a different wave pattern. Say they need tension change. Say they need something like that. Okay. That's when those programs and periodization schemes fall short. Okay, something else I wanted to also mention. This is huge. Okay, conjugate training involves linear periodization. Okay, this is something that a lot of people don't talk about. A lot of people shame, linear periodization doesn't work. Oh, it's going to get you hurt. Again, conjugate takes advantage of every single form of periodization and methodology out there. Okay, this is what makes the system so potent, is that if you give me a problem, I can solve it, right? If you give me a problem, I can solve it no matter what. If I have someone that is young and weak, linear periodization is going to work great. If I am older and stronger, you know what? Linear periodization is still going to play a big effect because it is the most straightforward way to get really strong, right? It also means we run into walls, which is why you have sequences. Okay, this is what makes a conjugate system elite. This is what makes practitioners of conjugate. This is kind of what separates those people that use a conjugate system and the people who truly have developed their own conjugate system. Okay. And so this is something that, again, block periodization is going to be present. Okay. All these different periodization schemes are going to be present. You will commonly see things like 5x5s and things like that within a conjugate system because they are going to employ whatever is necessary for that particular athlete. Okay. So again, don't get it twisted. Not everybody is running their conjugate training exactly like Westside. Okay, Westside is solving specific problems that they have with their own athletes, right? Westside is dealing with strong athletes. Okay, so they are dealing with strong athletes. So they had to develop some sort of system to solve problems that stronger athletes run into. Okay, doesn't mean that Westside didn't develop with younger and weaker athletes because they did. Many of their strongest athletes started with them when they were young, and so they solved problems as the years went on, right? Where Dave Hoff got to at his very peak is not where Dave Hoff started at. He was in the same system, same thought process, but was not using the same methodologies for every single part of his year, right? It was constantly shifting. Again, the same can be said for any type of athlete. Where your athletes start at is not where they're going to end at within your system, assuming that you have them for long periods of time, okay? And so this is kind of where I hopefully shed a little bit of light on what a conjugate system is and what would qualify as a conjugate system. Again, I did not want to make this too long. I was hoping that people that wanted to listen to this could just easily access it and listen to it. If there's any questions, again, if I need to clear something up, I can always do a part 2. Again, you can find me on Twitter at Zach Goodman. Okay, you can find me on Instagram. I think Zach Goodman72. Not sure. I think it's Zach Goodman72. Okay, I'm pretty active on both Instagram and Twitter. Okay, so if you have questions about this, feel free to reach out. I'm pretty good about getting back. If you have questions that I can answer on the podcast, let me know. Okay, peace.